Thrall. Episode 2. Mr. and Mrs. Harker. Klaxons rang and floodlights ignited, dousing the manor and surrounding gardens in a blinding light. Panicked voices shouted, spurred on by the discharge of gunfire echoing within the headquarters. The shooting quickly died away, replaced by the shuffle of running boots through the halls of the elegant old building. The young officer drew to a halt at the door to the Lieutenant General's quarters. He drew his sidearm and turned to the troops gathered behind him, seeing the fear in their eyes, mixed with the desire to prove themselves as more than occupying troops. The officer took a deep breath and pressed his thumb and finger down over his mustache, trying to calm his racing heart. With a shout, he burst through the door, troops spilling in after him, swinging their rifles up to bear. The rich scent of blood assaulted the senses. One trooper threw up as the others stood frozen in horror. The young officer held the cuff of his green-brown long coat to his mouth as he stepped cautiously into the ungodly butchery, attempting to avoid the masses of bloody gore. The body of the Lieutenant General was slumped in his bed. The old man could have been sleeping, if not for his emaciated form, pale color, and 2 trickles of blood running from a pair of puncture wounds on the man's neck. Something moved in the shadows behind the propped-up corpse. The young officer raised his weapon, the sound of racking bolts telling him at least a few of his troops had done the same. "Any Mozdolj," he shouted. The form of a woman emerged from the darkness, pitch-black hair falling like curtains over her face. Her skin was as pale as snow, speckled with a crimson red. The sheets of dark hair parting to reveal bestial eyes and needle-like fangs. "Hey Thrall," the officer yelled too late. Dissolving into mist, the monster billowed out before engulfing 2 troopers. Blood sprayed as the mist reformed into an amalgamation of fangs, claws, and demonic wrath. Gunshots and screams mixed into the blur of blood, the fanged monster making short work of the fresh young soldiers. The silence of death gripped the room, broken only by the impotent click-click-click of the officer's empty pistol. The beast approached, slowly, gracefully, the nightmare form resolving into that of a beautiful woman. The officer wanted to move, he tried, but the woman's gaze pinned him in place, terrified and dripping with the crimson spray of his men. She clutched her side where multiple bloodless holes had punched through her snow-white skin. Staggering towards him, she slid her wrist across her fangs. A slither of red trickled down her arm. She retrieved a glass from the bedside table, letting a single drop of blood fall into the clear liquid. The officer trembled, a single word forming on his lips as the woman steadily raised the glass to his lips. "Vampire." The sun rose over the Carpathian Mountains, bringing the new day and banishing mortal nightmares back into the shadows. The officer drove east, daring a quick peek over his shoulder into the padded darkness of the car. He couldn't make out anything within the darkness, but he knew, among the blacked-out windows and piled blankets, lay a woman with snow-like skin and pitch-black hair. Andrew blinked his thoughts away as he drove down the moonlit street. He slowed to a crawl and swung the silver sedan around the badly parked red hatch. Pulling up into the driveway, he took a deep breath and took his time adjusting his mustache in the rearview mirror. He looked once again over the files scattered across the passenger side seat. The photo of the young man in the folder was bright-eyed and full of life, nothing like the gaunt and tired man Andrew had been tailing for the last week. On paper, Henry and Veronica Harker appeared unremarkable in every way. A fact in itself that Andrew found suspicious when compared to the mess most rogue vampires left in their wake. With another long drawn-out sigh, Andrew left the car and approached the small suburban home with blacked-out windows. The broken door swung open quietly, the 3 individuals inside already too preoccupied to notice Andrew's arrival. "This is bullshit," a tired-looking young man said while pacing the living room, and nervously combing his hands through his messy brown hair. A young woman with pale skin sat on the edge of a couch, reaching out for the young man every time he passed. "It's okay, Henry. Miss Lucy can help me. We don't need her help. We have been coping fine on our own. Mistress Lucy sat on an armchair, smiling softly at the exchange in amusement. Her pitch-black hair framed her pale face, making her smile appear doll-like and harmless but no less unsettling. If you call leaving witnesses at nightclubs, raving about blood-sucking monsters, then yes, you have been doing perfectly fine. We don't need you, Henry said, spinning to point an accusatory finger at the pale woman. Andrew instinctually moved his hand over the concealed holster in his jacket. Lucy smiled dismissively at Henry. Your passion is admirable, but please adhere to your mistress's wishes. Veronica snickered. Mistress. I'm sorry, but we aren't into that kind of stuff. For the first time since he had arrived, Andrew and Lucy's eyes met, sharing a momentary look of intrigue. You give your Thrall a great deal of agency, Lucy continued. Thrall. Henry and Veronica repeated almost in unison. Oh, my poor sweet thing. Your ignorance would be endearing if you hadn't been dumped at my doorstep. If us being on your turf is all you are worried about, we can leave, Henry said. If it was only that easy. I don't see why it's not. That is because you are mortal. You see things with the limitations of your short and frail life. We do not have that luxury. Now, I suggest you fall in line. Thrall or not, it is impolite to feed upon one already marked by another. Luckily for you, you enthralled one. I am a very respectful house guest, but continue to push me and I may be forced to make a mess. Henry's mouth went dry, the woman's eyes boring into him and igniting a flame of fear at the very center of his being. He couldn't move, he couldn't think, and every breath felt like a test of will. Cold hands grasped at the hem of Henry's shirt as Veronica pulled him to the couch beside her. She pulled him in close, feeling his racing pulse thumping like a drum. Veronica as always appeared locked in a state of eternal youth and innocence, but in that moment her eyes sharpened as she stared down the other woman. If you do not want us to leave, what do you suggest? The first step is a change of residence. Lucy rose from her seat and motioned towards the door. Henry lifted his head, his lips quivering as he tried to form words. We are not. His eyes met with Lucy's once again, and the words died in his mouth. Feeling his pulse quicken, Veronica rose to her feet, imposing herself between Henry and Lucy. We're not going anywhere until you tell us why. Now whatever you are doing, stop it. The girl's youthful face had gone, replaced by snarling fangs and eyes as dark and cold as the pits of hell. Lucy's head turned to the side as if an invisible force had struck her. With fangs extended, Lucy returned the younger woman's bestial stare, her clawed fingers like talons digging into the armchair. Andrew could feel a physical tension fill the room. He felt frozen as the two women faced each other. His hand had closed around his pistol, but he lacked the strength to draw it. Lucy's laugh broke the standoff, her dreadful visage returning to its placid doll-like state. It looks like I underestimated you, my dear. I do not wish to harm you or your friend, she made a dismissive hand gesture in the direction of Henry. I simply wish to help you. We are sisters now, and we must look out for our own. Veronica continued to snarl until she felt the warm pulse of Henry's hand brush across her cheek. He was shaken but did his best to fight the instinctual fear, forcing himself to look into Veronica's eyes. He flinched as her talons swung in at him. When he opened his eyes, he saw the Veronica he had always known, her arms wrapped around him and her face nuzzled into his chest. Lucy stood and dusted off her dress. We have wasted enough night. Pack your things and be ready to leave within the hour. Without waiting for objection from the young couple, she strode to the front door. Unfortunately, I have other things that demand my attention. I will leave you in the capable hands of Andrus. She motioned to the mustached man, who nodded in acknowledgement. Both Henry and Veronica turned with surprise, seemingly unaware of Andrew's presence up to that point. The old soldier smiled, the expression not reaching high enough to hide the suspicion in his eyes. Please, call me Andrew. Within the hour, Veronica had packed her single suitcase with everything she owned. Henry, on the other hand, had things spread out across his bed, desk, and much of the room's limited floor space. He had emptied the various secret compartments around the house and was in the process of packing them in order of most importance. Veronica lay lounged on an office chair in the corner, spinning slowly while examining the pistol Henry had given her. "That is not safe, Mrs. Harker," Andrew said from the doorway. She jumped, almost dropping the firearm. "I think I should probably take that," the mustached man said with a nervous grin. Henry looked up. Andrew could not tell what the younger man was thinking, but he could understand his misgivings about Andrew taking their only weapon. "Don't worry, Mr. Harker, you can have it back. After I teach you how to use it." Henry's look of concern did not ease, his eyes still fixed on the gun. Andrew thought to inquire more about Henry's feelings but was interrupted by a bubbly Veronica. "Did you call me Mrs. Harker?" She giggled, finding the title amusing. Andrew felt caught off guard, raising an eyebrow as he replied. "Yes. That is the name on your marriage certificate." Veronica was lost for words until Henry quickly interceded. "It's a fake. Being her legal spouse makes forms easier. Co-workers will accept that my girlfriend is sick, but the government is more persistent." He smiled back at Veronica, who was evidently hearing all this for the first time. Andrew nodded. "You are full of surprises, Mr. Harker." Henry scoffed. "As you said when we first met. I have someone I need to keep an eye on." "Very true. I apologize, Miss Smith," Henry added before Veronica had the time to open her mouth. She smiled unsurely. "Yes. Veronica Smith." She blushed and did a fast spin on the chair. "But, you can call me Mrs. Harker, if that's easier." When Andrew looked back at Henry, the young man's face was bright red, and he had become very invested in where to pack a butterfly needle. Andrew smirked at the embarrassed young lovers. He picked up a blood bag, turning it over in his hand. Cameras and motion detectors are one thing, but these are not cheap. "All you need is a needle and a lot of time," Henry replied, still looking intently at the ordered chaos on his bed. The mustached man raised an eyebrow, taking in the amount of blood bags Henry had in storage. "You are dedicated and resourceful. Your mistress is lucky to have you." "She is not my mistress. She is my girlfriend." A schoolgirl giggle came from the still spinning office chair. Andrew smirked. "My apologies. You are an unusual pair. It will take some time for me to get used to." The room remained in relative silence for a few moments, broken by the rustling of the bag and the squeaking of the office chair. "If you will excuse me, I will wait by the car." Andrew nodded a courteous bow and left the couple alone. Outside, he pressed his thumb and finger down over his mustache as he examined the pistol. Long-trained muscle memory kicked in as he ejected the magazine and racked the slide to ensure the chamber was clear. He was about to stow the weapon in his coat pocket when something caught his eye. He thumbed a single round from the magazine and studied the small engravings etched into the head of the bullet. There was a tiny script in a language he didn't understand but knew exactly what it was. The front door opened and Andrew quickly shoved the weapon into his jacket. He forced a smile and helped Henry carry the bags to the car. His heart was racing and his mind spiraling out of control. He didn't know who these young people were, but he swore to himself that he would find out. He would uncover who they were and how they got their hands on a weapon made to kill vampires.
Thank you for listening to Thrall Episode 2, Mr. and Mrs. Harker. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. If you want more, let me know what stories I should focus on in the comments below, or try some of my other stories. I have been TJ Hamilton. See you later, mate.